One of my favorite things that my Granny Gazzie made when we go to her house to eat after church on Sundays for Sunday dinner, my favorite thing on the table, without a doubt, was her sweet potatoes. She made the best fried sweet potatoes ever. They were just so good, so perfect every time, just always the same consistency, always the little brown edges around the slices, and they were pretty thick, so they really stayed firm and stayed together. They were so good. I loved them. They were always my favorite. She also made arch potatoes. They were usually on the table too, and Paul and I both, I don't know which one of us thought of it, we liked those too. They were just stewed potatoes, what we would call soupy potatoes. But one of us realized at some point that she cut them, I guess because she was used to cooking for such a big crowd. Like a lot of times when I stew my potatoes, I cut them in small pieces, maybe even as small as this. This is sweet potato, but she cut hers in quarters, so they were like boats. Me or Paul one decided they were like boats, and they were always, again, perfectly cooked. They're just the perfect consistency, not mushy but not hard, just perfect all the way through. Anyway, those sweet potatoes, I really loved them. Well, at some point, probably even after I was married, I asked Granny, I said, why do you not ever make fried sweet potatoes like Granny Gazzie? How did she do it? So she explained to me how she did it, and I said, but why don't you do it? And she said, because I tried so many times and they never turned out like Mama's, so I finally quit. So she quit making them. Well, I've tried a few times too, and it's difficult because if you cook them too fast, you might burn the outside, but the inside's not all the way done. If you cook them too hard, like too long, then they just turn into mush. Hers was never like that. Now, mashed up sweet potatoes are really good. I like those still, but just though I'm still after that wonderful sweet potato that Granny Gazzie served every Sunday. So I don't have that mastered yet. I'm still trying. Maybe someday I will. And maybe you've got a tip. If you do, please share it with me, and I'll try your tip for good fried sweet potatoes. Anyway, but at some point years ago, I don't know, at least 10 or 15 years ago or something, I seen a candied sweet potato recipe, and I can't remember. I've cut it out and glued it in my cookbook that I've created of things like that over the years, and I don't remember where it come from, but I'm guessing it come from Southern Living or from Country Living, one of those magazines. But it's candied sweet potatoes. Well, the first time I made them, I thought, well, these are not Granny Gazzie's, but they're pretty dadgum close. They're pretty tasty. And then I started making them like I would make them at Thanksgiving and Christmas and other times, but especially for Thanksgiving and Christmas to take to Granny's house when we would all eat together, and everyone just loved them. So all these years later, that's one of the things that I make anytime we get together. Well, at Christmas we were sick. My family was sick, so we didn't get to eat our usual big get together with Granny and my brothers and their families. So today, finally, we're getting to do that. We're going to do it. So I've got my rolls, my yeast rolls over there rising. I've got my turkey ready, and then I was going to do the sweet potatoes, and I thought, well, I should just show y'all how I do it while I'm in the middle of it. So this is what you need. Now I'm going to double the recipe because there's a lot of us, but I'll put the original recipe. The link will be in the description below, so you can go see it for yourself. But basically, it's really simple. So you take 4 pounds of sweet potatoes, it says about 8 medium, and you peel them and you slice them into thick rounds. Now a lot of times sweet potatoes are really hard, especially if you get big ones like what I had today. So one of my tips is, of course, be careful with your knife, but sometimes once you cut the end off one of them, that kind of gives you a stable place to, then you can set it up and it's stable, it's not wobbly, and then I slice it down through the middle, and then it's easier to cut all the way through. So that's kind of what I do, because it doesn't matter how they're sliced. It matters is they're going to taste really good. But that's just one little tip that I do. Sometimes if I have an extremely hard one, or if you just have a really big sweet potato, some sweet potatoes, can get like that, and that would be an awful big slice. So sometimes if you kind of cut the bottom off of one end and then stand it up and cut all the way down through it, then it's easier to cut up. So that's my tip for that. Then you need 1/2 cup packed dark brown sugar. Any brown sugar works. 4 tablespoons butter, or margarine it says, but I use butter. 1/3 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of coarsely ground black pepper, and then a pinch of nutmeg. So the first step is, I've already cut them up and I've got all my ingredients here assembled, is that we're going to, in a 6-quart sauce pot, place potatoes in enough water to cover, heat to boiling over high heat, reduce heat to low, cover and simmer 5 minutes or until potatoes are barely fork tender, slightly underdone. drain, and then we're going to place them in a casserole. That's what it says. I like to drain them and then put them back in the pot and then put the sauce that we're going to put on them. Now, over the years, I've had other people tell me they kind of make sweet potatoes like this too, and they don't boil them at all. They just put them in the oven, and it just takes a little bit longer to cook. So if you want to skip this step, you could skip it and just go ahead and stir it up with the sauce and just bake them longer than the recipe advises. I'm always in a hurry, especially on that Christmas and Thanksgiving, when I'm trying to hurry and get everything made before people get here or before I go to Granny's. So I always do the boiling part just because it speeds up the process for sure. So then you're going to preheat the oven to 400, and then you're going to heat these other things together, the other ingredients that I mentioned. And also, it's kind of tricky in the ingredients. It doesn't say it, but down here it says that you also need 1/4 cup of water to add to those ingredients. But again, I'll put the link to the recipe down below so you can see it. And then you drizzle that over the potatoes, and then you bake them for about 40 minutes. And you can baste them during that and stir them if you want to kind of make sure that every piece gets a little bit of that great sauce. But I like to cook them in the pot of water, drain them, put them back in the pot of water, and then put the sauce over them and really stir them up, and then pour them into my dish that I'm going to bake them in. But now I'm going to show you how to put it together. So I already have some water boiling because I'm really in a hurry today. Seems like I was like, oh, I've got all this time, and then as I start cooking, I realize, no, you really don't have all this time. So you better hurry. So I've already got my water boiling, so now I'm just going to add the potatoes. And I may need to add some more water if I don't have enough to cover them, but I didn't want to overflow. I might need a bigger pot since I doubled the recipe. I'm going to add some more water to mine. Cover them. And while they're cooking, I'm gonna let them come back to a boil and kind of simmer for about 5 minutes like the recipe said. I'll kind of keep a check on them, and then I'm gonna be making out my rolls while that's happening. So then I'll show you the next step once we get to that point. So our potatoes have been cooking for about 5 minutes, so I'm going to drain them out. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and start the sauce. So there's our butter, our brown sugar, and again, I'm doubling the recipe for my big crowd today. Here's the water and all the spices, the nutmeg, the pepper, and the salt. And we're just going to let that melt together and cook for, oh, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes. I think the recipe says 3 minutes, but basically you're just wanting the butter to melt. So our sauce has been cooking for about 3 minutes, so it's all the butter's melted, and we're ready now to pour it on the potatoes. Since I'm making a double batch, I think it's easier to drain my potatoes and put them in a big bowl and then pour it on there and kind of stir them around and then put them in the baking dish. But if you're just doing the single recipe, it's fine to just go by the recipe, what it says. It actually says just to pour it over in the baking dish, and that works fine too. So then I would just kind of make sure they're all coated. And this is the baking dish I'm going to use, a big one, because as I said, I doubled the recipe. One of the reasons I like to make sure they're all coated is because I rarely go back and baste them while they're cooking, like the recipe says to do. So now we're going to put these in the oven and let them cook for about 40 minutes, the recipe says. at 400 degrees. And you can keep a check on them, and if you want to baste them and stir them kind of as they cook, as the recipe suggested, that would probably be a good thing to do. I just usually am too busy to fool with that, and they still turn out great. So the sweet potatoes are done. I just got them out of the oven. They're still piping hot. You can see they're in the bottom of the pan. That wonderful sauce that we made kind of pools in the bottom, so when you scoop out a big helping, you can make sure to get some of that with you and put it on your plate. They are so good. I've got to wait to actually eat them with all the other good stuff we're making. I've got a turkey in the oven still cooking. I've got some of my rolls made, and I need to cook the rest of them. I've got my dressing that I need to brown on top and kind of cook through, and then everyone will start arriving by then. But I've got to taste the sweet potatoes because they're just they smell so good. They're so good. So good. Sweet potatoes are one of the finer things in life, I think. So these are not exactly like Granny Gazzie's, but they come awful dadgum close, I'm telling you. Sweet potatoes, when you think about Appalachian Foodways, they play a big role because they grow well in the Appalachian area. So a lot of farmers grow them. I've grown them once or twice, but I really don't have a large place where I can grow potatoes. We used to grow Arse potatoes in Pap's big garden, and he grew sweet potatoes some. But anyway, they play a role in the foodways of Appalachia, and in other places too, I know. There's so many heartwarming stories about people when they were young. This is in the days before the wood cook stoves like my Granny Gazzie cooked on, and they would just have to cook in the fireplace in the open fire. And so many great, wonderful stories I've read where one of their favorite things was they would roast sweet potatoes in the coals there, in the ashes, and that was like a sweet treat because they didn't get, many sweet treats. Other stories I've read about people when they come home from school in those days, their mother might have them a sweet potato baked so they could eat that as an after-school snack before they started doing their chores. Probably the most common way we eat sweet potatoes is just baked, like a baked potato, but we were baking the sweet potatoes. This is my second most common, though. This is my go-to sweet potato recipe, especially when I'm making a lot for a crowd like that's coming today. We're really excited to finally get to eat together with everyone, our Christmas, since it got delayed. I wish I could go back and stand by Granny Gazzie and let her show me how she fried her potatoes, because her sweet potatoes, because they were just always perfect. Always cooked through, but not hard, but not mushy either. She just had that perfect consistency. So if you've got any tips about frying sweet potatoes, I hope you'll share them with me. I hope you'll leave a comment and share them with me. And as always, I hope you'll continue to drop back by while we celebrate Appalachia. Appalachian Foodways is a huge part of what I talk about. These wonderful recipes, sweet potatoes. Even though this one didn't come from Granny Gazzie, wasn't one I grew up with, but I have been making it for several years for my family, and they all love it, and I know you will too if you try it.